The darkest theory suggests that the children were victims of human trafficking or mass abduction. Medieval Europe was not immune to criminal enterprises that involved kidnapping people for slavery or forced labor. The children might have been lured away by criminals who transported them to distant lands where they were sold into bondage. This theory would explain why no trace of the children was ever found in the Hamelin area and why no survivors ever returned home. Human trafficking was a reality in medieval times, with criminals operating networks that moved people across great distances for profit. Children were particularly vulnerable to such schemes because they could be more easily controlled and manipulated than adults. If the Hamelin children had been captured by such criminals, their families would never have learned what became of them. Multiple versions of the story describe someone from outside Hamelin who had the ability to influence the children to follow him. This figure appears consistently across different accounts, suggesting that his role was considered significant by those who preserved these stories. The consistency of this detail across various sources lends some credibility to the idea that an outsider was responsible for leading the children away. The psychological impact on Hamelin appears to have been devastating and long-lasting. Various accounts describe the town implementing restrictions on music and dancing in areas associated with the children's disappearance, revealing the depth of the community's trauma. These measures were not merely symbolic gestures, but practical attempts to prevent any repetition of the events that had destroyed so many families. Imagine the horror experienced by parents who watched their children walk away and never return. Families lost their sons and daughters in a single day, with no explanation and no closure. The grief must have been overwhelming, made worse by the complete absence of any information about what had happened to the missing children. Parents would have spent years wondering if their children were still alive somewhere, suffering in captivity or struggling to survive in foreign lands. The town's response to this tragedy reveals how communities attempt to cope with incomprehensible loss. The restrictions on music and dancing represented an effort to control forces that the townspeople believed had contributed to their children's disappearance. Whether they blamed supernatural influences, psychological contagion, or criminal activity, they were determined to prevent anything similar from happening again. The enduring mystery surrounding the Hamelin children demonstrates how some historical events resist explanation despite centuries of investigation and speculation. Young lives simply vanished from the historical record, leaving behind only the grief of their families and the desperate attempts of later generations to understand what had happened to them. The story has survived precisely because it captures something fundamental about human vulnerability and the fragility of the communities we build to protect ourselves. What makes this tale particularly haunting is how it reveals the thin boundary between the safety we assume and the chaos that can suddenly consume entire communities. The children of Hamelin lived in what they believed was a secure world, surrounded by family and familiar surroundings, until something disrupted that security forever.